What's up everybody? In today's episode I'm going to be answering some of the most frequently asked questions in my channel. If you left a comment in the past, well, today may be the chance for me to answer those questions. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's get started with the first question, and this one comes from Austin. Now this question was posted in my video about potting up containers. How do you know when to put up a plant into a bigger container? But anyway, so he asked, if plants always grow faster in the ground, why would they not grow faster in a bigger container? What do you consider to be the primary factor that breaks your advice when it comes to the ground? Well, check this out. So there are a lot of plants that do well in containers. As plants get bigger, obviously you want to put them in a bigger container. But I can tell you there's no container out there big enough to support the plant like it would be in the ground. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it. For instance, this rose right here, it's in this 3-gallon container. Now this is root bound, so it needs to go into a bigger container. So the next size up is gonna be just about that much wider and that much deeper. And then that will hold this rose for about another year to 2 years. And then guess what? It's gonna get bigger and then you need a bigger container. So it depends on what type of plant you are growing. Plants that have fibrous roots normally do okay in containers. Now there are many plants out there that have a deep root system or a taproot system, and those plants usually do way better in the ground than they do in a container. Let me give you an example. So this is a Pakistan mulberry right here, and as you can see, it rooted itself through the container into the ground. Now this plant right here will not grow to this size in a container, ever. That's just not happening. It is not my opinion, it is reality. If you want to try yourself, go ahead and put a mulberry tree in a big container and see how big it gets. And the reason why is because mulberry trees have a taproot system. And as soon as it hits the bottom of the container, they get stunted. They don't like to grow anymore. They need to be in the ground to be able to grow into the soil, expand its root system, taproot system, so that way it can grow big. A lot of these mulberry trees here, if you ever find a big one like this in a container, it did not get to that size in a container. It probably rooted itself in the ground like this one right here, and then when they go dormant in the wintertime, what nurseries do, they go and dig them up and then repotting into a big container, and then they sell them to you. People who don't know any better, they think that plant grew in that container naturally from a little tree to this size in a container naturally. Well, that doesn't happen like that. It's just not going to happen. So that's one of the things that you gotta look for when putting plants in containers or putting plants in the ground. All right, so the next question comes from Moran. And now this question was posted in a video that I made about how to deep water your plants. So if you're wondering how to deep water your plants, well, check that video out. Anyways, he asks, should I fertilize my fruit trees during the first year? If so, what kind of fertilizer should I use? For apple, apricot, and pear trees. 2 months ago, I planted these trees and don't know when and how often I should fertilize them. Is liquid chicken manure good for them? All right, check this out. Most plants that you actually buy at the nurseries or anywhere else, they usually are already fertilized. Most nurseries use a slow-release fertilizer that will last for several months. Now, I can tell you, fertilization should be the last thing in your mind when buying plants. The last thing. 99% of your time should be spent learning how to water your plant rather than how to fertilize it. Fertilizers, I can tell you, out of taking care of thousands and thousands of plants over the years, fertilization is like the last thing in my mind. So, if you are buying a new plant and you're wondering when should you fertilize it, well, that depends. Are you gonna keep that plant in that container? Well, if you're gonna keep that plant in that container, when you first get it, don't do anything. It has already been fertilized, so you don't need to do anything. I would probably give it about 6 months to a year, and then you can go ahead and start fertilizing. Now, what type of fertilizer to use? Just to keep it simple, the fertilizer you see on the screen is the one that I use for all my plants here. Very easy to use, and don't even worry about the ratio. It's all about the NPK. Plants do not care about the numbers, okay? So, and the next thing you need to worry about if you're using a fertilizer is if it's a slow release or not. The reason I like a slow release fertilizer is simply because if you overdo it, it's not gonna kill your plant because it's not gonna burn it, because the fertilizer is released into the soil slowly. And that's how plants actually eat naturally. They eat a little bit at a time over a prolonged period of time, and that's the reason why they don't burn in nature. Now, when you're fertilizing artificially, like in a container, and you use an instant release fertilizer, plants don't know when to stop eating, and that's how you can burn your plants. So if you're buying a plant, don't worry about fertilization. Give it about 3 to 6 months or so, and then you can go ahead and use that slow release fertilizer that you see on the screen right now. Now, if you're planting your tree in the ground, now check this out. I live in the desert. My soil here is clay. It's dirt. It has no organic material, but yet my plants grow just fine. So if you are putting your plant in the ground, just water your plant. Don't worry about anything else. Water will bring life to the soil, and that life in the soil is going to feed your plant over time. Now, if you really want to help your plant, and because it makes you feel better and you have nothing better to do with your time, go ahead and get some compost and just throw it in the ground and put some mulch over it so it doesn't dry out. And that's it. That's all you need. Don't waste your money on fertilizers. It's that simple. So the next question comes from Barry. And now this question was posted in my video where I talk about the best potting mix for your container plants. And he asks, since your mix dries out quickly, do you water your container plants more than once a day? Now check this out. Nobody can tell you how often, how long to water your plants, but actually how long water them until they're wet. It's that simple, right? But technically giving you a specific time how long to water them is just not gonna work. So how often to water will depend on the ambient temperature around your plant. And also not just about the temperature, you also have to think about the sun exposure. Is your plant in full sun? Is your plant in the shade? Are there any radiant heat sources around your plant? Let's say your plant's in the shade, but then you got your compressor running next to it in the summer, pumping out hot air. What do you think is going to happen to your plant? Your plant's going to dry out. Now, from personal experience, I can tell you, plants, most of the water, they use through transpiration. That is sweating. They sweat for the same reasons you do. And just like you do, when you sweat a lot, you get thirsty and you drink more water. So for plants, when they sweat, they evaporate the water through their foliage. And at the same time, they are sucking up the water, moisture from the soil. So the hotter it is, the more they sweat, the faster the soil is going to dry it out. Now you see this rose right here? This rose is fully rooted in this container. Now in this container right now, in my ambient temperatures of 100 degrees every single day, this plant is drying out here in semi-shade, 50% shade cloth twice a day. Now if this plant was in the sun, I can guarantee you it would probably be drying out 3 to 4 times a day. Now if this plant was not fully rooted in this container, it will probably take an entire day to dry out. So nobody can really tell you how often to water your plants, but I can teach you today how to water your plants in containers just by following my 50% rule. That is, wait until 50% of your container is dry, roughly, and then that is how often you water your plant. If you don't know how to check, just stick your finger in there and then dig it in there every 6 hours or so when you first get your plant, and then see how, roughly how long it takes to dry, about halfway. And that is exactly how often you water your plant. As you start taking care of plants and spend time with plants, over time, you're just gonna be able to look at a plant and you're gonna be able to tell if it needs water or not, or even just by looking at the soil. As the soil dries out, it's going to shrink. So usually the sidewalls of your container, they're gonna start detaching from the container, and that's a sure way to know if your plant needs water. So that is exactly how often you water your plants. Nobody can tell you exactly how often because every plant's going to be different. That's just like telling you how often and how long to drink water every day. So the next question comes from Servant of Jesus. Is there such a thing as a dwarf Pakistan mulberry? And this question comes from my video where I compared the Shangri-La mulberry, the Pakistan mulberry, and the green mulberry. Now check this out. The answer is yes and no. Naturally, a Pakistan mulberry is going to get huge. The only way that it's not going to get huge is if you keep it in a container. If you keep it in a container, that tree is probably going to be the same size forever. Can you consider that a dwarf tree? I guess so, if you force it to be. Or if you put it in the ground, the tree is going to get huge, but the only way to keep it short is going to be by pruning it. But naturally, no, there's no such thing as a dwarf Pakistan mulberry out there. Now, when I say dwarf, everybody thinks about like a 4 to 6 foot tall tree. There's no such thing. For me, when I think about a small tree or a dwarf tree, it's usually about 10, 15 feet tall, just to give you an idea. So everybody's idea of small and big is going to be different. But to answer this question, no, there isn't such a thing. But if you wanted to, you can actually keep it short by pruning or just keep it in a container. It's not going to perform that well, but I guess if you're looking for size, that would be the only way to keep it short. If anybody else tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. Okay, so the next question comes from Jemes. Anyways, it's on the screen. You can go ahead and read it yourself. So he asks, can you answer this question for me? I'm transplanting some emeralds, bushes, into a 2.5 by 2.5 by 20 foot long planter. The planter runs along my fence. How big of a bush should I even consider using to plant, considering the root ball and the growth within my planter? Just to be clear, 2.5 deep and wide, but about 20 foot long. Give me the knowledge. Well, check this out, buddy. Hopefully your planter is open on the bottom, because otherwise those bushes, they have a very vigorous root system, and 2.5 foot deep is not enough for them. That will be just like keeping them in a container restricted. If that is your goal, then by all means, those bushes are probably not going to get that big because they need more space to actually grow out their root ball. Now, the only way to actually get that done is by making sure your planter is open on the bottom so they can actually root into the ground and go past 2.5 feet. Now, how big of a bush should you start with? Well, that's your choice. In general, I always tell people, just buy the smallest plant that you can afford. Just buy the smallest plant that you can find. Plants grow eventually. The only exception to that rule is if you're buying a slow-growing plant, like a jaboticaba, for instance. Those are super slow-growing plants. So for that type of plant, buy the biggest you can find because it's saving you time. But for a plant that has a vigorous root system like an emerald bush, those plants, they grow fast once they get rooted in the ground. So just find the smallest one if time is not an issue. Now, if you want instant gratification, then go ahead and find the biggest one you can find. So it's personal choice at that point. But keep in mind, 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, it's not really that, it's not big enough for an emerald bush like that. So, but as long as the bottom of the your planter is open, you should be okay. Okay, so the next thing, the next question is comes from Trawl. Where do you get your spot spreaders from? Are you able to link? Thanks. And then that question comes from my video where I talked about the best thing you can do for your plants, which is, you know, installing irrigation system. So what is a spot spreader? Let me show you. So this right here is a spot spreader, okay? So it's just a stake, and then you hook up a line to it, and then it will actually water your plants. Now this specific one comes out at a 90-degree angle, but you also have 180, which is obviously half, and then you also got a 360 one. Now I like this 90-degree angle ones because I can just put it on the side of the container, and then it will water my entire container. Now you will only see this spot spreaders at nurseries because it's the easiest way to actually water a large amount of containers. They hook up to this 1/8 of an inch line, which you're not going to be able to find locally, so you have to order this online. So all my irrigation supplies I buy from dripdepot.com. So if you're looking for irrigation stuff, just go there and they have everything that you can ever imagine. Specialty irrigation supplies. And if you're looking to buy in bulk, the best time to buy is usually during the winter months because they usually have sales from like 20 to 50% off. I buy in bulk every year, once a year, for the entire year, and that way I can save some money. Now, is there any advantage for the spot spreaders? To be honest, unless you're growing hundreds of containers, or it's just very easy. So it has the actual dripper, and it has the stake built into the same thing, and I can just stick it in the container and it will water my containers. That's the only reason why I use it, and that's the only reason why most nurseries out there use them. Now, if you have a small garden, you don't have to use this spot spreaders. You could, but to be honest, in areas where you may actually step on them, that's not a good idea because, as you can see, they stand upright. So if you're gonna actually use it in your garden, I recommend something that lays flat on the soil, just like a regular dripper. But anyways, dripdepot.com, that's where I get all my irrigation supplies. And that's it, everybody. So I answered a few of your questions. If you have any other questions, just comment below. I'll be making this video at least once a month, answering some of the most frequently asked questions in my channel. And if you like the video, don't forget to like it. If you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? And as always, I will see you next time.